as you have guests who are honored guests are today. Thank you very much. I'm Ruth Applehoff, the Executive Director of Guildhall, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you here today for a conversation between Robert Storr and Chuck Close. It is in conjunction with our wonderful exhibition, Chuck Close New Works, in our galleries, and I hope that following the conversation, you will take the time to go in and check out all of the galleries. I think you'll be quite thrilled and amazed. Guildhall has a wonderful, devoted board of trustees and a dedicated staff, and I just want to thank them, especially Christina Strassfield, our museum director, for hanging and selecting this beautiful exhibition. Thank you. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank Millie and Arnie Glimsher and Douglas Baxter from Pace Galleries. Thank you so very much. I also must acknowledge all of those who have donated so generously to the exhibition. The list is a veritable who's who of the art world. Our lead sponsors include Mark and Marissa Borghi, Amanda and Glenn Furman, Agnes Gunn, Barbara and Rick Lane, Dorothy Lichtenstein, the Noto family, Catherine Farley and Jerry Spire, and the Wally Finley Galleries. Exhibition co-sponsors are Josephine and John Eastman, Melva Buxbaum and Ray Liracy, the May and Samuel Rudin Foundation, Marjorie and David Silverman, and New York State and Suffolk County. We also thank Fairweather Magazine as the exhibition media sponsor. Please offer all of these folks a round of applause. Thank you, and it's my pleasure now to introduce to you the woman who has underwritten this wonderful talk and inspired it. Her name is Rebecca Cooper. She's a new board member for us. She's known for her 30-year career as a gallerist, and most recently she had a gallery in Sag Harbor. She's an educator and collector of contemporary art, and she's one of our newest, most hardworking Guildhall trustees. Please welcome Rebecca Cooper.
Thank you, Ruth. I'm privileged today to have the opportunity to introduce one of America's greatest artists. Chuck Close is a visual artist noted for his highly inventive techniques used to paint the human face. He gained international acclaim for his black and white portraits, which set the art world on edge in the late 1960s, and he has been a mainstay of the contemporary art scene ever since. He was born in 1940 in Monroe, Washington. He earned his undergraduate and graduate degrees in fine art from Yale University. In 1967, he moved to New York. He had been a part-time resident of the East End for over 40 years. His first retrospective was in 1981 at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. His work is found in numerous museum and private collections worldwide. Chuck Close was a recipient of the 1995 Guildhall Academy of Arts Lifetime Achievement Award of the Visual Arts. He had a one-person exhibition of his large-scale Polaroid photographs, Chuck Close Up Close, at Guildhall in 1991. Robert Storr has served as professor of painting and dean of the School of Art at Yale University since 2006. He was curator in the Department of Painting and Sculpture at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, from 1990 to 2002, and was chosen commissioner of the 2007 Venice Biennial, the first American invited to that position. He has been a contributing editor at Art in America since 1981, writes frequently for Art Forum, Parquet, Art Press in Paris, and Frieze in London. Mr. Storr has written numerous catalogs, articles, and books, notably about such artists as Louise Bourgeois, Chuck Close, and Philip Guston. Among his many honors, Storr has received awards from the American chapter of the International Association of Art Critics, Independent Curators International, and the Smithsonian Institution's Archives of American Art, as well as a medal from the French Ministry of Culture, signifying his admission as a Knight in the Order of Arts and Letters. Please join me in welcoming Chuck Close and Professor Robert Storr.
Okay, I'm going to kick this off a little bit. When I taught at the Institute of Fine Arts, I did lectures, which I called stand-up art history. This is going to be a kind of improv version of a dialogue between the two of us. Not exactly Wallace Shawn and Andrew Gregory, and not exactly Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, but somewhere in that neighborhood. But the other thing you should know is that this is a conversation which has essentially been going on since 1982, 3, 4, something like that. And since this is a conversation, but since this is a stage, we have props. And the props consist of 2 tall glasses of scotch. And I can only say, I am sorry that you are not also holding such a thing. But this will loosen our tongues. Who knows, we may say totally reckless things. Anyway, the idea is that we will carry on this conversation for 45 minutes or so. We will open it to the floor. If any of you have a roadie and you are up to speed, then by all means speak up. And otherwise, we will just make this a pleasant afternoon in conversation about Chuck's work and about this show. And I think first to say to Christina Strassfield and all people involved in producing it, and also to Mickey and Layla Strauss, who have been a host of much of what's been going on, that this is a great occasion, and thank you for that. Now, this exhibition contains a lot of work which will probably be unfamiliar to people who have followed Chuck's work, since a lot of it involves really new material in terms of when it was made, but also new material in terms of how it was made. Starting early on in his career, Chuck revived certain processes. Mezzotints were made by a few other artists. There was a Japanese printmaker who used it a good deal, but in general, the mezzotint process had been abandoned by most contemporary printmakers until Chuck started to use it. Daguerreotypes were pretty much out of commission until Chuck started to use it. In this situation, you have work that involves entirely new techniques, and I'm going to ask Chuck about them, and then some very, very old ones, but to different purposes. For example, tapestry weaving is a very large part of this show. And the background of that and how it is in sync with contemporary technology is one of the really interesting parts of what's here. The other part is a group of watercolors which are made by digital means. And that watercolors are generally associated with the most intimate of handmade works of art on paper, now transposing that to the age of mechanical reproduction, but yet getting all of that wonderfully subtle stuff is what he's been about. So let's start with Chuck and ask about these new techniques and how you're...
Well, the watercolor marks, or every single mark is my mark.
Okay.
I made 12,500 watercolor marks from white to black. The computer doesn't know what color it's going to be, it just knows the value. So I realized that 12,500 wasn't enough. I made 10,000 more, so it was 22,500 watercolor marks. So every stroke in there is my mark. The labor-saving aspect of using digital technology is it takes a year to make one of those prints by the time you've worked it all out. And what we do is we rigged up a pigment printer to spray watercolor instead of the kind of reproductive pigment that they use. And we stopped it and we sprayed just the magenta, and then we'd figure out where the cyan blue was going to go. Then we'd spray just the cyan and the yellow. So when you go out, look at, for instance, the piece of Cindy Sherman. Even though she's smiling, that is Cindy Sherman. No one recognizes it, but I see her all the time and she's always smiling. So, but anyhow, there are little splashes of blue sticking through, but you can actually see the way the color lays on top of it. And I did a piece in 1975 by hand, which Rob put in my retrospective at the Modern, And it was made that way and purposely left unfinished. So I always want to get back to it. The other things that are, I'm not interested in nostalgia, and I'm not interested in.
He is interested in Scotch.
I'm not interested in antiquarian activities for their built-in antique value. I'm interested because they're not used up yet. And people may have moved on from daguerreotypes to other things, but I always thought photography never got any better than it was with daguerreotypes. Tapestries, I've always loved tapestries. And when I was first working with a large Polaroid camera in Boston, they were using that camera to photograph the backs of tapestries. So someone could see what the original color of the tapestry was before it got dirty and faded, which I thought, well, isn't that interesting? So then I saw two incredible tapestry shows at the Met. The first one better than the second one, but by the new director of the Met,
Thomas Campbell?
Tom Campbell. And I had made some tapestries in China and a rug in China, and I thought, oh, I really want to get back to this. So I think what you were talking about, you can tell us.
You do.
know what? Oh. I always do all the talking. This is supposed to be,
I'll pipe up, don't worry, go
it's
ahead.
supposed to be a dog and pony show, and I'm not sure whether I'm a dog or the pony. The Jacquard loom revolutionized tapestry making. Before the Jacquard loom, a painting by Rubens would sell for X. The tapestry made from it would sell for 10 times as much. And they would take 2 or 3 years to make. And typically, the weaver had a kid, usually a son or something, sitting up above, dropping the threads as he needed them, and he would weave it in or whatever. So the Jacquard loom came along, and what they did was they got cards, and they punched holes in them. And then there are lifters that if they hit the card, they stay down, they don't lift anything. And if it goes through the hole, it lifts all those threads. So it might be 1 up, 2 down, 2 up, 3 down, whatever. It's all done then as they put the shuttle through. So cut forward from that 200 years, and IBM is trying to get information into its first big mainframe computers. And this very primitive cell phone, I'm talking a really primitive cell phone, has more memory than those tractor-trailer size computers did. So it didn't recognize numbers and it didn't recognize letters. How are we going to get in there? So they went back to the Jacquard technique, and they made IBM key punch cards. Any of you old enough to remember key punch cards? Don't fold, spindle, or mutilate, and put a stack of them in the computer. Go chunk, 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 chunk. In IBM's headquarters, in the entrance, they have a Jacquard loom. They acknowledge the fact that this came from tapestry making. So it's not a moribund, archaic thing. It's something that changed the course of art history and then changed the course of technology. So for me, the ideal way to talk to the loom is with the computer because we share the same language and the same vocabulary. So we do as much as we can do on the computer, and then we start weaving sections. But it's an amazing process that I love so much. And I don't think it's antique or antiquarian. I think they're, really works of contemporary art. And it's stuff that, that matters a lot to me. Oh, one other thing, when they put the first jacquard loom in a mill in Bruges, the union of tapestry makers, the guild of tapestry makers, burned the mill down and burned there's a fly here, and burned up the loom. And of course that didn't stop anything, but those tapestries workers came from the village of Ludd, and that's the origin of the word Luddite, someone who's against progress, change, and whatever.
Well, okay, that's far better than I could have done. That's why I asked you to do it. But I can speak from another side, which is that, you know, the effect of this also produces something that can be produced by no other means. For example, if you take the mezzotin, rather than being an absolutely continuous tone, because it's done with a kind of comb or a thing that gouges the plate, there are all kinds of percolating marks that become a characteristic of that tone. And in the case of the tapestries, you have the tufts of thread, which stick out at slightly different distances from the surface and catch the light because they're actually three-dimensional, so that whereas in a flat painting situation, even a little bump of pigment on the surface like impasto doesn't have the same effect of having the light filter through a series of tufts, so that what you've got with the tapestries is not a translation of a painting, it's an entirely different work of art with an entirely different visual experience making it available.
And like the daguerreotype, like the mezzotin, that rich black of all the burr and whatever is the richest black and dead. It doesn't have any sheen. And similarly with the tapestries, all the blacks are wool, but the other colors are cotton. So the wool just sucks the light in. That's why they're almost like holograms, they're so dimensional. And then to get the whites, if you look at Lucas Samaris's hair, instead of one white thread, we wrapped 3 white threads. So it actually made it puffy. And if you know how light comes through something, thanks to Cezanne, we know that the space between tree branches is often more positive than the branches themselves. That light expands as it goes through something. So check out, like especially in Lucas's hair, it's really dimensional and really puffy.
Well, Chuck's beard is new, by the way, so I can't wait till that has a starring role for just these reasons. In terms of how you've proceeded, printmaking, photography, tapestries, and so on have been really equal parts of your work. Painting has been the lead in certain ways, but a little bit like Jasper Johns, people don't say one is a version of the other. They really recognize that it's a completely integrated but also highly differentiated practice, right?
One thing that made me very happy was Jasper and I are both in the Academy of Arts and Letters. And he got the gold medal in printmaking first, and I got the gold medal in printmaking second. And I thought, wow, you know, after all the things that Jasper's done, somebody's saying this is equal to the other work that the guy does. And I know my paintings are not going to be in every city around the world, but there might be a print. So if someone sees a print, I want it to be a work of art that is just as compelling, just as rigorously arrived at as a painting, because that might be all they'll see.
Well, you've taken things like mezzotin and so on, which are extremely exacting. You've also picked up materials which are incredibly unruly. So when you did the pulp paper pieces in 2 different variations, you're dealing with this kind of gooey, fibrous muck, basically. And also it creates a surface which is extremely repugnant to some people, maybe, but certainly it is not the kind of cool kind of surface that
I think it depends upon if it's your face or not.
Ah, okay. Well, my face is getting to the point where it's beginning to have that texture anyway. So. But I wonder if you could talk about choices like that, to take on pulp paper and to make something that doesn't look like a craft object, that actually, again, is right up there with painting.
And that brings up an interesting point. The dirtiest word in the art world is the C word, craft. It is, let me tell you, it is. You don't, there is work that is called post, well, post-studio art.
Post
for one thing.
everything.
Post everything, but no, post.
D-skill, that's it, yeah.
De-skilled. Thank you, Mr. Greenwald, or Greenwald, whatever the hell his name is, Lucy. De-skilled, which is people run away from whatever facility they have, and they want to show how much they don't care. I remember when Joe Zucker was an old friend of mine, and I used to see all the time when I lived out here. He said, you have to show them how much you don't care. If you look like you care, you're going to get shit on. Really. And it was the beginning of bad painting. When that sort of thing broke through, you say, well, let's make something that purposefully does not look beautiful, decorative. Well, I love things that don't look beautiful and decorative. I like things that are tough, have an edginess, have whatever. But I'm also not against things that are luscious why would I limit myself, to one attitude? I was never cool anyhow, so it didn't make any difference.
As we know from Philip Guston, you have to be a really terrific painter in order to make a bad painting a la Guston. And as we know from Paul McCarthy and Mike Kelly, you have to have exquisitely bad taste to make something as good as what they make with bad taste. De-skilling is not the same thing as ineptitude.
No, but I'll tell you, let me use Paul McCarthy as a good example. Nobody knows him, nobody's going to say anything, right? Okay. He made, along with, what's his name, Creammaster?
Oh, Matthew Barney.
Matthew Barney. Matthew Barney had the best first show by an artist I had ever seen. And I loved McCarthy's work. When it was jerry-built, made out of spit and baling wire and crap, they had unbelievable power. But when these people get money, they want to take on the movie industry or take on Walt Disney and their animatronics or something, and it worked. In my opinion, the work suffered because it was so much about the hand. It really was about somebody fashioning something out of shit and making it be compelling and wonderful.
Well, I'll defend Paul's piece, but that's for another occasion.
Okay.
But I do think it's true that, the business of delegating virtually the entire production of your work, particularly if you don't have mastery or at least a real intimacy with those techniques, is a fool's errand for a lot of artists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the painting side of things, since you said at lunch today that you thought you weren't going to make any more of a certain kind of painting.
Oh, yes.
And so the question is, which kind of painting is that? And
How many people saw my show in Chelsea in the fall? Oh, good. That's good. Well, what about the rest of you? What the hell were you doing? It was up for 4 months, for Christ's sake. Went through the hurricane, went up, down, up. Anyhow, at the opening, I rather loudly and famously said, I'm never making one more of these goddamn paintings. And I thought, okay, I want to make something different, and I don't want to end up making one or more of those paintings and dragging it into the gallery with my tail between my legs. I'm going to make it so it would be so humiliating to make another one that it'll force me to make something else. And I just sold a painting, an early painting, for me, for a lot of money. Huh? What?
it was a cough.
And it bought me about 1.5 years' time to work without having to have anything finished, anything saleable. I could pay the bills, I could pay my staff, I could pay my nurses. I have a big monthly nut. No. But it was, so I do. I said, for the next 1.5 years, I have that time to find something else I want to do. And it was only because of those, and I've always used, as you know, severe self-imposed limitations to move me from where I am to something else. And it's been thrilling, but I'll tell you, what I'm doing is so time-consuming. Not that I'm against that. My friend Mark Greenbaum is here, and Mark Greenwald. And the painting I did of you was like, what, 14 months or something? Took that long to get it that goofy. If you've seen it in the Met, you know what I'm talking about. But it was, what was I saying?
Painting next. Painting
Oh.
with her.
Yeah, so I went back to painting 3-color paintings, essentially red, blue, and yellow. So I thought, oh my God, why is this taking so long? Because it's 3 one-color paintings on top of each other, which the original ones were too. So, yeah, but I'm moving right along. I have a couple pieces I really like, and I'm so happy that I forced myself to do something else.
Well, let's talk about Mark a little bit, because you've known Mark for I don't know how long, but for a very, very long time. And Mark makes the most labor-intensive pictures I can imagine, except they're about maybe 1/100th as big as yours. So he puts all the same degree of mark making into a little thing, and he had a great show at Sprony Westwater.
How many
this
saw a
spring.
show at Sprony Westwater? Shame on you.
Well, it was a great show. The other thing was that he is the only person to have done Chuck the way Chuck does others. There were these wonderful portraits of Chuck, which were not entirely flattering, and which, in a sense, returned the favor. But the reason I'm mentioning this is that you've been basically in dialogue with Mark over many, many years. And you've actually been in dialogue with Jasper, with many artists. You have, in the show,
Alex
portraits
Katz,
of Alex. You've done portraits of many artists. And I wonder if you
Eric.
could talk about what the nature of those exchanges are like, and what it means to you in your own working process to be actively, in the mix with so many different people. I mean, for example, you did 2 wonderful portraits of Paul Cadmus, and at the time that you
3,
did
actually.
them, 3 already. At the time that you did them, Paul Cadmus was barely on anybody's radar unless
Yeah.
they were a specialist in the art of the 30s and 40s. So, if you could talk to me how you choose the artists that you portray and how you enter into dialogue with them.
Well, I didn't really like Paul Cadmus all that much. No, it's true. And it was really Mark who forced me to take another look. And then Mark curated a show, and what's his name? John Curran, he was in the show. So I'm sitting between, John Curran's between me and
Lisa
Cadmus.
Skevich was there too.
And boy, did Curran interview the shit out of Paul Cadmus. He wanted to know everything about egg timbre, everything about all this stuff. So you know that there are people out there for whom this work, while generally not known that well, has tremendous urgency. I mean, there are 2 ways that works. A show like When Attitude Becomes Form becomes a handbook for generations of artists. 1 page is enough to make a career. Same thing was true of, oh God, not Richter, not Kiefer. Polka. His retrospective years ago, there was 1 room with like 200 small paintings. It was enough to keep 10, 20 artists going for the rest of their lives. So there are people who play that role in your life, and people who kick open doors and make it a lot easier for you to go through. My friend Alex Katz, to a lesser extent, my friend Philip Pearlstein, but still there. Andy, who was a great friend, and Alfred Leslie, who else? They made an intelligent, forward-looking figuration when most figurative art in the country wanted to go back and breathe new life into 19th century issues. And those guys were called the eyeball realists, like we don't use our eyes when we look at a photograph, come on. But they hated me so that I had people spit in my face. I had people throw beer cans at me in a conversation with the Figurative Art Alliance. They thought they were somehow closer to God because they painted from life. Give me a break. I'd paint from life if I knew what the hell I was looking at, but I'm face blind. I don't want someone sitting in my studio for a year. They turn their head as a new head, turn that head as a new head. I have to make it flat, and when I make it flat, I can commit it to memory. And then I have almost photographic memory of anything that's flat. So everything in my life is a product of my learning disabilities. I've been face blind my whole life. I didn't know which kids were in my kindergarten class or the other kindergarten class. I didn't know their faces. I didn't know their names. I went through school. It was a nightmare. And I'm not sure why I'm telling you this. Oh, the other learning disabilities are that I'm overwhelmed by the whole. So I have to break it down into a lot of little bite-sized pieces. Long before computers did work with imagery that's made out of pixels, I was doing it by hand. I had a whole show work ready. The day that my show opened at Legendary Biker Gallery, which Klaus Curtis ran, I walked by a newsstand, and there's a Scientific American with their first computer-generated thing. Oh, God. Now, no one's going to believe that I make this without using the computer.
Let me ask another variation of what I was trying to get at, was about how your relationships with artists have informed what you do. I mean, for example, when I was young, which was a while ago, in the 60s and 70s, there was still this idea that the history of art, particularly in America, followed a necessary path. Some people were on it, some people were off it, some people were so far off it they were invisible, and so on. And, you know, when in the 70s people started to really look at the wide horizon of all the work that was being done by communities that were totally ignored, women, gays, lesbians, blacks, Hispanics, et cetera, Asians, you know, it just freaked people out who believed that there was this one clarifying track. And it was called Pluralism, and I don't know how many critics, Peter Shellwell among them, hated it. He still does. But you know, the truth of the matter is that the portraits that you have made are the description of an exceedingly pluralistic art world. They make different kinds of art, they come from different places, they belong to different social and ethnic groups. And I wonder if you could talk about your sense of what your portraits say in general about the art world now, as opposed to that long ago idea that it was just
Well, when I
guys
did
like
the
us.
Portrait Speaks with Art Resources Transfer and my really good friend who unfortunately has died, Bill Bartman, and I did, up front, I did portraits of the people that I'm going to interview. And in the back, I did their work that they made at the same time that I painted them. And I was so pleased that the scope of the images of the people I painted was so diverse. And, you know, my friends don't belong to any camp, any whatever. And those interviews, which I did with, let's see, who from here? Cindy, Eric Fischel, April Gornick, Via Solomons, yeah. Well, I did a separate book with Via with them, which is, I love that book. But anyhow, you know, it's like you want to go eat in the same restaurant every night and pick your favorite meal and eat it over and over and over. Doesn't sound all that interesting. So I credit my friends and the people, especially the people that who've lent me their image. It's painful. They hate them, you know. But I always say, no matter how bad I make you look now, in about 20 or 30 years, you say, well, I didn't look that bad at all. But Mark doesn't feel that way, right? Mark?
Well, none of your subjects owns their own portrait, right?
Right.
So you've sort of spared them having to say, no, actually, I don't want it.
Right.
Karen,
Yeah.
I thought we
The
were going
day
to have a
I
little bit
became
of
a quadriplegic, I was at Gracie Mansion giving a speech, and I had this unbelievable chest pain, just blinding, and Aggie Gund, who was my really, really great friend, a supporter of mine, and did student in the school, and I'm on her board, or whatever. Like, you can't get any better, with maybe the exception of Dorothy Lichtenstein, who also supported the show. And I forgot to thank last night. But at any rate, short-term memory loss.
who owns commissions and who owns their own image.
Oh, so Aggie comes up to me at Gracie Mansion and she says, can I commission you to paint a portrait of me? And I was in such pain, I just screamed at her, snapped at her. I said, don't you know I don't do commissions? Why the hell would I want to do a painting of yours? I only paint my friends. You're not my friend. And then I went across the street and I became a quadriplegic. Probably because I've been so nasty to wonderful Aggie, who is, if you could be, she's Jewish, right?
Nope.
No, she's not. Oh, sorry. Well, maybe she could be a saint then. She deserves sainthood. She really does. She's so great. But anyhow, so then later, more recently, I said, okay, Aggie, now we're really, really, really good friends. So it's time for your portrait. So she comes, I take the portrait of her, and Sienna and I were in Rome, at the American Academy in Rome, and I made a painting of Aggie there. And she was in town for something, MoMA something, and she saw it, and then came back, and after a while she came to Arnie and she said, I want to buy my painting. Arnie says, you can't own the painting. She says, oh yes I can. And so I said, no you can't. And we had to, so we did, we found a collector who would buy it and give it to the Cleveland Museum.
Excellent.
Because that's where she's from, that's her family, and so it's as close as you can get but without actually buying it yourself. If I ever made a commissioned portrait, it would be the end of everything. How could I say I'll paint you but not you?
When you make somebody's portrait, what are you thinking as you're looking?
Well, a lot of it is to keep myself distracted enough that I'm not so obsessive that I can't make a decision. It's sometimes really a question of being so aware of what you're doing that you can't make a decision at all. I can't order in a restaurant. I can't decide what to order. And then I like what you ordered a lot better, and I wish I got what you ordered. So, but with people many are called and few are chosen. I shoot 10 times as many people as I paint. But they think it's a contract. They think I'm going to paint them. So that's sort of rough. But I think people who know me well know that there's no way to get me to do something that I don't want to do. Arnie is the only person who owned his own image because the son of a bitch can buy it. It's his gallery, he can buy it. So I was...
That's insider trading, isn't it?
Insider trading, yeah. But I was very thrilled that he just gave it to the Beaubourg.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And they need one too.
Yeah.
But again, to come back to when you're working, when you're really spending your entire time looking at another person in Polaroid form or in some kind of broken up form, what kinds of things are you thinking about? Is it entirely painting decisions, or are you also thinking about other aspects of the exchange? Have you ever painted a portrait where you actually decide, I don't like this person, I don't want to look at them for the next 6 months?
I don't like them afterwards. I tell you who I don't like afterwards, but their widow may be here. So, but I always liked them when I did them. Well, let me explain.
It's like serial dating. I mean, you're like,
Yeah, oh, that's right. Every 15 minutes you move to a different table, yeah. But I've been in therapy for a good 40 years, maybe 45 years.
you and Woody Allen, right?
Huh?
You and Woody Allen?
So I thought, I'm never going to have another breakthrough aha moment again. I mean, we've covered everything. But about 2 years ago, I'm with my shrink, and she said, you know, you never talk about your grandparents. And I moved, when my father died, I was 11. We moved to live next door to my grandparents while my mother went to work outside the home for the first time. And I loved my grandma and grandpa, and they had a TV and we didn't. So I'd come home from junior high school and I'd go over there with them. And my grandmother was the most agoraphobic and phobic in all ways. Nervous wreck. And we'd be watching TV. It was so long ago. All you Altacockers, we were watching the Army McCarthy hearings. How about that? So, you know, I watched her crochet stars, like silhouette, 3 point, 4 point, 5 point, 6 point, 7 point, 8 point. Well, and they're all done without a pattern, and she made big stacks of them on the floor, hundreds and hundreds of them. Or she would do flowers, each one a different flower, each one without a pattern. Then she would take those incremental units and she would crochet them together. And then she would dip them in, she'd bleach them, dip them in sugar water, take them out in the backyard and stretch them on a big wooden stretcher with pins to hold it. So I'm talking to my shrink and I said, oh my God, making a big, for her, everything she did was like raking gravel in a Zen Buddhist garden. The activity of crocheting or knitting brought her peace. And I think it clicked with me that if you do an activity that you love and you just keep doing it, eventually you get somewhere. If you're overwhelmed by the whole and you don't know how to make it, break it down into little pieces. So I thought, oh my God, that's where it came from. The second thing was that my grandma loved to knit. So I'm watching her, she's been knitting a cable sweater, each cable totally different from the next. Again, no pattern. And she had made us tons of sweaters. But she's making this sweater and I'm watching her and she starts ripping the yarn out and rolling it up into a ball. And I said, Grandma, Nana, you're throwing away all the time. She said, time doesn't matter. I said, if I'm not making something that I like, I'm going to stop, rip it out, and start over and make something else. So that stayed with me as well, that it's not the time that goes into that makes it valuable. It is, and she said, I can remember it as if she said it yesterday. She said, it's not sweaters I like. You guys have way too many sweaters. It's knitting I like. And of course, because she couldn't go to the knitting store to buy more yarn, she just used the same yarn over and over and over. And there's an aspect of my work that's where I just do the same thing over and over and over. So I think she was incredibly influential.
Thank you all.
The Scotch just ran.